So, hello everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Tree of Life podcast. The first guest I have on today is someone who I've been following for a long time, and I was really, really wanting him to be the first guest. And yeah, his name is Mahon McCann. Here he is. We're feeling very divine in our natural light coming in the white background. So maybe it's fitting for the subject matter, but I think Mahon's will be better at introducing himself than myself, so you can go ahead.
Yeah, man, thanks for the invite and being the inaugural guest. It's a great privilege, very exciting. So I mean, my speciality is in philosophy. I'm doing my PhD in digital ethics at the moment, so I do the ethics of the attention economy, the commodification of users' attention. That's kind of my day job. And then on the podcast, on my essays and stuff online, I talk about the meaning crisis, which is really the kind of struggle for meaning, for purpose, for community that a lot of young people are facing in the modern world, based on my own experience of coming from a very meaning crisis place and kind of finding my way out of it through philosophy, through psychology, through religion, through Catholicism, and then kind of bringing people along, I suppose, for the things I've learned to try and help them get out of their own thing, or their own meaning crisis. And so that's what I do pretty much.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you have a pretty interesting backstory. So I think people would like to hear
I'm glad you think it's interesting. So typically, I talk about this. I've told my story a few times recently. It was actually the Sunday Independent did a story on it.
Cool.
So I guess somebody was interested.
Big time.
You know what I mean? It's not that exciting, but so I was born 1994, obviously a zillennial, between Gen Z, millennial, micro generation. I don't know if you know about this, but
you made up that term.
Yeah. Just trying to be trendy, basically. But so my family, I was raised as an atheist, which was quite unusual at the time. It was about 2% of Ireland. Ireland was 90% Catholic, and then you have some other denominations. But my parents were raised Catholic, and then basically were like, it's a load of nonsense. We're not interested in this anymore. We're going to try and do something different and raise our kids completely without any religion, in theory. So we weren't baptized. We didn't make communion, confirmation, or anything like that. And basically, they were going to try and raise us as secular kind of atheist. I think as well, it's important, I suppose, we weren't just not religious, we're opposed to it a lot of the time. Really, it was, kind of a hatred. The Catholic Church was my arch nemesis, basically. Of it was like the Darth Vader in Star Wars, you know what I mean? The evil empire kind of marching along. And obviously all my friends were Catholic. I grew up in a parish of the Divine Word, so everybody goes to the Catholic school. They all go to mass on Sundays, and then I'm just this weird atheist called Mahon that's telling them science, prove God isn't real. And so that's how it started, and kind of I've since I became a Catholic last year. I was baptized at the Easter Vigil, and so it was that journey, I suppose, of coming from such a radical atheism to becoming a Catholic that seems to be of interest to people. I don't know.
Like you were saying, I suppose with the abuse scandals of the Catholic Church, I think a lot of more people now would probably say they have in Ireland would probably say they have a hatred for the Catholic Church, but probably, at that time maybe you were probably even more different by saying you were being
totally.
Say you had a hate
ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. But now it's it's 25% of the Irish population are technically nuns, so non-religiously affiliated. And probably, went from, it was 93% Catholic, I think, and now it's 69%, and that's there's obviously even less people actually participating, in terms of there are people who'll still take it but not necessarily be actually involved in the sacraments or anything like that. But the abuse scandals, but also just a secularization that's gone on in the West, that's been kind of going on for a couple hundred years, which connects to the meaning crisis as well. People who are, sometimes it's called an enchanted worldview, and I don't necessarily like the term, but for people that are in a religious worldview and stuff, you have a purpose for your life. It gives you a sense of meaning, connects you to other people, oftentimes to a community of practices and stuff. But in the West, as we've moved away from organized religions, we've kind of lost that in a sense, and people have tried to make alternatives and various various things. You know, oftentimes, like for myself, like you look to the East, like Buddhism or like Hinduism and things like that seem almost like religion light or something like that. You know, they have practices, meditation, contemplation. So you try and fill that gap with other stuff, basically. That's not your own kind of Western religion, I suppose. And so, yeah, I think that's a big driver of the meaning crisis, is that secularization process. And then the abuse scandals came at a time where that was already going on, and it just made it even more. It's like, okay, you lose trust in it, and it's just like, bam, people are already kind of on the way out. So, yeah.
And so, yeah, how did your philosophy change, I suppose, or your beliefs, going from that youth where you were really hated probably all religion, or
totally,
anything
man.
to do with it, to where you are now?
It's a solid question. I hated religion, man. I was big like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens kind of atheist. Like the story, sometimes called the Enlightenment narrative, is like that the religion is this like dark, superstitious cave almost that kept us like captive. You know, and it's a thing about power, it's about control, it's about holding people down. And so basically we need to leave that behind and kind of escape this cave of religion. And so I was like one of the elite born outside of the cave in some sense. Like my parents had been like, they'd already cast off religion. So now I was like, you know, I thought for myself, I had to like actually like lead people away from God in terms of my, like I just argue with people, I'd be parroting that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I still had all these existential questions. It's like, who am I? What does it mean to be a good person? Like, what's the meaning of life? What's the point of any of this? Like, why should I be? And I think that really demotivated me in a way. Like, it was very hard for me to find a way of life that was significant to me, basically, because I couldn't accept the kind of traditional answers to those questions, but I still had those questions myself. And so I turned to philosophy, really, was in order to answer them. It was like the only thing I wanted to study in university. Some people are very like, they know what career they want and stuff. I was kind of lost, man. I was just like partying with the lads, like keeping up in school because I didn't want to make my parents sad, but like didn't really feel any motivation. And so I knew I had these questions and I wanted to try and answer them, and that's why I went to philosophy, really, to get into it. I've obviously spent now 10 years studying philosophy and like thinking about these things. And I think when you study philosophy, you have to give answers to these questions. And then when you think about it, you kind of go, well, does this make sense? You know what I mean? Like if God doesn't exist, what is reality then? How does reality work? And how you get into the kind of deeper philosophy stuff. And then atheism actually starts to kind of come apart a lot of the time, unfortunately, because atheism is a negation of a worldview. It's a no to theism, which is a worldview. It's, you know, it's an account of reality. And so atheism says no to that, but then what does it say yes to? I mean, what's the alternative in some sense? Nietzsche, who's like one of the most famous atheist philosophers, obviously thought we had to become the Übermensch, the being capable of like creating their own values and their own norms and their own way of life. And I kind of tried that as an undergrad, I think, of being like, I'm just going to be the master of whatever I do. And basically just ended up, you know, drinking too much beer and being hungover and like,
just on that point with the, just what came to my head, do you think some of that, like, you know, the way things like manifestation and things like that, which are becoming popular now, where you're kind of, people are trying to, like you're saying, control the world to their will or whatever. You think that really falls into Nietzsche's philosophy? Or
totally, man. Yeah, magic as well, or technology. I mean, to a point where it's like you want to. Nietzsche's big idea was the will to power, which was that essentially each being is trying to develop their power as much as possible. It was kind of a biological thing for him, but obviously the Nazis interpreted it in a very different way. But basically, the ultimate way to live is to be able to bend reality to your will, which is the exact opposite of the religious worldview, if you think about it, because that's all about conforming yourself to the will of God, which is, in that, God is ultimate reality. So it's kind of one of like obeying reality and one of making reality obey.
I was actually going to say this in a later question, but it's because you kind of touched on it now. Something that's really like striking about Christianity, and just reading the way Jesus spoke is kind of that what Nietzsche would kind of criticize as like slave morality, of not to have the goal of making yourself the beneficiary of whatever in the world. It's to put others before yourself, and that I have some some verse here that I was meant to read out on it, but yeah. So Mark 10:44, whoever wants to be first must be slave of all, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as ransom for many. And it's slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those masters who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. And you can see how people like Nietzsche find that hard to justify or whatever, because yeah, if you have it says, if you have an evil master and you're enslaved, it's not self-evident that the moral thing is to not act out in violence or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a, that quote has so much in it, man, of
yeah.
And I think for Nietzsche, D.C. Schindler, I've had on my podcast, who's a great professor of metaphysics, theologian, he argues Nietzsche was looking for true authority, basically. He was rebelling against authority. And I think a lot of people now, we all have issues with authority. It's just basically who's actually the authority, basically. And that's what Nietzsche was searching for, was kind of the root of authority. Because obviously with an authority, you're supposed to obey them. You're supposed to do what they say in some sense. But then if you think there is no authority, it's like you don't obey anybody. You're kind of a law unto your own. But then, does that, for me anyway, when you try to live like that, you become, almost a slave to just your own desires, your own most basic instincts. Like it doesn't lead you to your fullest potential or your fullest being. You actually collapse down to like the lowest kind of quantity.
Yeah, because
which is a big problem.
I suppose for people, they see that as they're trying to get freedom by not conforming or following a kind of a way of life and making it up for themselves. But yeah, like you said, you end up just kind of being a slave to your own desires, like you said, and like human instinct, which is
and there's a good reason for that. There's a good, because like our traditions are like human beings, like we're biological animals or irrational animals, so it's really by culture that we actually fully develop like what we could be. And so if you reject the tradition that was kind of helping you mature and grow up, it's like you kind of have a do it yourself, but then you end up going back to like the basic. It's like you've lost the whole wisdom of that tradition that would help you become fully yourself. And you can go to other traditions to try and get it and stuff like that, but I think it's quite difficult. Even like the Buddhism thing, it's like as a Western person to go to fully immerse yourself in Buddhism is very difficult. Like you would really have to change everything basically. And so because we lost our own tradition, we actually lose that path of development that comes from those values. And that's why you end up being more animalistic and more designed. And that has its own, like the punishment is built in itself.
I actually had this conversation with my friend the last day, and like we were just kind of generally talking, and he was kind of saying, oh, it's weird that we have marriage to one person, that's, well, I suppose, that's encouraged to be married to one person for the rest of your life. And he was saying, oh, it's just that's just a social construct, society or whatever, that kind of thing. And his argument was, look at animals, and like many animals obviously don't have a monogamous relationship for their whole lives. And yeah, like I was saying, but my response to him was, like, we have the free will to go against those instincts, and that's kind of what a lot of religion gives you. Yeah,
tutors it really. There's a thing called the naturalistic fallacy as well. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It's where you conflate what's natural with what's good. So just because something's natural doesn't mean it's good. Like bear attacks are natural. Cancer is natural. Tidal waves are natural. Doesn't mean they're good automatically. You know what I mean? So like animals can behave certain ways, but animals also don't know the good. Like they don't have moral responsibility like we do. So they can do whatever, animals do in some sense. Whereas we have the ability to choose one action or another, which is the basis of morality. Like all morality is like, if you can choose A or B, it's like, well, which one should you choose? You've got your hand on the lever, so we're responsible. And that's, that needs training, I think.
I think my response to him was like say if you go in and you have like whatever fast food, it's like you have the urge to eat that, but you can kind of, that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do for your body or whatever. So there's always things like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you get me going on monogamy, man, I'll be going. I'm having this argument quite recently myself, to be honest.
Okay, we'll leave that offer to.
But yeah, I mean, we'll come back to it possibly. Don't get derailed. But I suppose as an undergrad, like I was studying philosophy, I was running into a lot of these arguments, man. And because I was an atheist, I could only stick with like the modern philosophers. Was a big problem. Yeah. And like a lot of these ideas are very recent ideas. Yeah. Like they have older roots, but like in modern philosophy, like Nietzsche, like Sartre, like Camus, like these guys, when you go to them for answers, it's like they give you these kind of it's already within a particular worldview. And for me, that actually just like ruined my character. Like it made me more rationalizing. It made me more hedonistic. It made me more nihilistic, more despairing. Like at times I was like, I don't know if I want to live anymore. You know what I mean? Like I would actually be, and because I was also at the same time, I was talking about, I was partying a lot. Like I was going out, and the wheels were really coming off in some sense. It was like the fun partying that I was doing with my friends, like secondary school, the start of college, started to take on like a more worse, tone to it. Like I wasn't stopping. And my parents were very worried about me. They were like, you're kind of like, do you need help here? Like you're going too far. Like I ended up in hospital, I nearly died. I was like, I thought this was going to be it. But it was connected to this despair that was just like, what's the point of life? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And so those philosophy ideas had real consequences for me. And then, I mean, after college, then I got into Jordan Peterson, who we talked about, who was kind of the first adult, I suppose, I ever saw defend Christianity, which was a real revelation, because I was like, okay, this guy seems to know some stuff. Maybe I've misjudged this tradition. I also took a lot of what Peterson said, like his practices and things like that, of like always tell the truth, take on responsibility, talk to your conscience, regulate your drugs and alcohol use. I started to do this stuff, and my life just got instantly better. I was like, okay, maybe there's something going on here.
We were having this conversation before we started, like the last few years, well, I'm going to speak for myself, but I think Jordan Peterson has kind of gone a bit off the route he was on, and a bit too political, and said some kind of hateful things. But I like, for me as well, I was saying like he was a massive person in getting me into philosophy, and just like showing how deep like the Bible is and religion, and like you were saying, he had such a massive impact those first few years. We were saying he came to Ireland, sold out the 3 Arena and all around the world, and like even though he's not a claimed Christian, I think he's probably evangelized the most people.
He's brought more people than anybody else, to be honest. They could have taken note. But I think, because the time I'm talking about is like 2016. Sometimes people talk about like the many Jordan Petersons, like there's a political culture war guy, but then there's also a psychologist, mythologist, who did really good work, like really good lectures. His first book, Maps of Meaning, is really, that's his book. Like that's all the later work is unpacked from that, really. Like that's the source of, it's hard to, I don't think we've even caught up now with the stuff that he's gotten to in that book. So like such a significant thinker. Like
like I remember another person who's kind of gone down that route the last few years, that I wouldn't really be in favor of, but when the first time he went on Joe Rogan, who I'm referencing there, but I remember just watching that and how he was unpacking the Bible stories, and I was just actually really blown away. Like it was a big moment in my life, I'd say, which I think it just seemed to be for so many people.
Literally for millions, particularly young men, but also women. I think that's overstated. I know women have been profoundly affected by him as well.
My friend, shout out Dean, he got baptized there a couple of weeks ago in Mullingar, but his sister actually said to me that the both of them were fans of Jordan Peterson. So so that was just like the first girl, I suppose.
My own sister, I went to see him in Dublin with my sister and her friend. They're both studying psychology, and we're huge fans as well.
That's good. I think you were saying as well, Jonathan Pageau, you're a big fan of, and I think that's someone who hasn't really gone down that political route and stuck to
Yes, John Vervaeke is another one as well that I've had in the podcast. He did the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. I think so. Like, to think about those thinkers, like even Peterson, like what he was doing in some sense, like we talked about, he kind of bridged the secular and the religious worldviews in some sense, even within himself. Like, he's a psychologist by training, but he took religious ideas like really seriously, like that they're really important. And he gave them like due credit. Like, these aren't just fairy tales that are for kids. Like, he's like, they contain deep wisdom and deep truths. And then when he translated those for people like me and you could see that there was value there.
Yeah.
And suddenly we were like, oh, okay, we've actually been like cut off from a lot of the wisdom that we need to live good lives, basically. And that for me was like a huge revelation. You know, it started me getting interested in the Bible, but also back to like ancient philosophy, Stoicism, you know, philosophy as a way of life, like going back to that ancient tradition, being like, they knew stuff that we don't know now, and I need it as a young person who's very self-destructive, and like, you know, I need to get my act together, basically. And so those thinkers, I think, are trying to bridge the gap between modern people and those kind of ancient traditions and worldviews that have valuable stuff, but we can't really access immediately, just because of the time.
That was definitely a big reason he had such an impact on people, is that you kind of saw this obviously very smart man who was like studied philosophy and psychology for whatever 30-40 years, and he's not coming from a place of that he was he's believing it because he was born into it. He's coming at it from the outside, that he said not a Christian, but he takes the Bible very seriously and sees how deep it is. And it was like, you know, if this guy is seeing them this way, then we're like, why shouldn't I, sort of thing. And
I think admiration as well is important there. It's sometimes a lot, like, even thinking about, they say that with like people coming into Catholicism or things like that, like friendship is very important, you know. Admiration is very important. Like, if you find somebody admirable in their behavior, you see virtues in them, it's like that makes you think, oh yeah, I should be like that, you know what I mean? Like, I want to learn from them. And but that makes you wonder, is like, what was this absence before him, you know what I mean? Like, he's the first adult I ever heard defend the Christian tradition, and I was 23 or 24, so it's like, you got to wonder, like, what's been going on, that there's just such a void of like any admirable people doing that, like.
And you think he would you predict that he will come like proclaim
rise again, like Peterson the White returns at the end of the day?
No, he's actually very sick, that's why we say that, but
I mean I don't know.
And do you think he will say, like, I kind of think he's Christian? Do you think he'll come out and say that? Or
I hope he does, to be honest. I think he's got a deep conflict in himself about that. And so, I think for his own sake as well, to kind of get over the spiritual battle he's having. And I think that was why he was so effective, because he was in two minds about it as well, like so many of us are and have been. So like, that's why he could bridge that gap, because he was between those worlds as well. But I think that's also why he's suffering now so much. And so
the you said about admiration, something popped into my head. Like, I remember when I was younger, like in Ireland especially, like I wouldn't have seen anyone kind of show a public showing of their faith, sort of. And what really kind of definitely kind of spurred an interest in taking it seriously, I suppose, was seeing footballers, like, so you know, like you see them praying going onto the pitch. Like, I remember I loved Neymar, and he used to, like, if he scored, he'd like kneel down and point the sky. And there's Rafinha, after Leeds stayed up, and the last day of the season, he kneeled down and walked the whole pitch on his knees, just straight after the match, while the whole crowd were there, like, and everyone was looking at him. So obviously, like in different countries, people are more just outward with their faith, but that was definitely something that like inspired me, because I was obviously admiring these guys, and they were like showing that it was important to them.
Totally, man. And they're doing admirable things, you know, like they're succeeding, they're showing virtues, like, and then seeing that they're crediting that as the source of their virtues, which is the opposite of Nietzsche. Nietzsche is basically like saying, like, I'm going to blow myself up to the size of reality, versus they're saying, you know, I serve the highest good, like I'm only part of a bigger thing. Whereas Nietzsche, and it's also important that Nietzsche went insane at the end of his life. He did lose his mind, like he did, and that was connected to his philosophy. Like, it was, sometimes people think it's not connected, but in some sense he paid a big price for that, for his worldview on it. So it's not, these ideas aren't neutral, you know what I mean? And I think admirable people embody those ideals. They're not just like intellectual, like, you know, ideas. It's like, that's actually, they show you the proof is in the pudding in some sense. And Peterson did that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Just one question I had. Because you're coming from like a clean slate, obviously atheism, and you weren't affected by your family, which a lot of people would be. Why was it that you ended up choosing Catholicism over other denominations? Which, I think like Protestantism and like Orthodox has they definitely have their virtues, and are definitely would be worth considering. Like,
yeah. So like I guess like after Peterson, again, I wasn't anywhere near becoming a Catholic, to be honest. Like I was like, might have been like looking at, I watched his like biblical series and stuff like that, like got a little bit interested in it, kind of slightly, but then it was through philosophy, really through Platonism particularly, like going back to ancient philosophy and being like, okay, how can I address these like deeper questions about the nature of reality and things like that? And that then kind of started to convert me, because I realized, you know, the Western tradition, basically, it's the marriage of Athens and Jerusalem. So it's the marriage of the Hebrew tradition and the Greek philosophers together, which forms Catholicism. And so that whole worldview that I started to kind of get into and be like, okay, I think this is actually the greatest worldview we've ever come up with. Like, this is the best. And it kind of comes, like, I don't know if you know Dante's Commedia, his journey into hell.
So you think it's the Greek philosophers, do you think their Catholicism really takes on a lot of what they
totally?
taught
A lot of them, they're recognized as like early Christian like prophets, almost like prophecies. They're recognized, like obviously Dante and the Inferno puts them in they're not in hell, so they're the only pagans basically that aren't like in there. They're as close as a pagan could get essentially to Christendom before Christ in his thinking. Because a lot of them, like Plato is just so Christian. Nietzsche rejects Plato, or he rejects Christianity as Platonism for the masses, basically. So like people want to understand, in ancient Greek philosophy, starts like 600 BC in Ionia. There's the thing called the Ionian scientific revolution. You get the natural philosophers, these guys that are like trying to figure out what the world is made of, how things kind of work. But then a guy called Socrates comes along who's like, you know, basically completely changes philosophy. He says philosophy is actually about becoming wise, basically. It's about, you know, connecting to reality and transforming as a result of it. And he does philosophy in a very different way than them. He talks to people in the forum. He has this dialogical thing with people, and he's a real character in ancient Athens, and then is very famously put to death for doing philosophy by the Athenian democracy. Okay. So he was going around doing philosophy, and the democracy was like, this guy, he's got to stop asking people questions. Like, so they're basically like, let's scare him and be like, we're gonna kill you, basically.
Because they thought he was a threat to their powers.
He was disrupting the democracy. Yeah. So they previously been enslaved to Sparta. Sparta took over Athens, the Peloponnesian War. They put in the 30 tyrants, which was like a Spartan oligarchy, and then the democracy overthrew them. So there was a new democracy, and it was very like fragile in ancient Greece. And Socrates was going around questioning a lot of people's assumptions and things like that. And so they're basically like, we got to get rid of him. And he's put on trial, but he very famously says at his trial, because they don't want to kill him, basically. They're like, we want to let you off the hook, but like, you have to stop doing philosophy. And he says, the unexamined life is not worth living. So basically, he chooses to die for the pursuit of the truth. And Plato,
which mirrors a lot of early Christians who were put
very
to death
similar
for their
to
belief,
Christ as well. Like, there's a huge amount of parallels. And Plato, who's Socrates' student, is 25 when this happens, and he thinks Socrates is the guy. Like, he's like, this guy is the most just person ever, the most wise person ever. And so he then starts writing as Socrates in all his dialogues. He takes on his identity basically to try and like become like him to his sage.
Which is what like Christians are encouraged nearly with Jesus, like.
Exactly, yeah. And like, so there's a lot of parallels in terms of that and the pursuit of truth. And Plato, if people know Plato, his masterwork is The Republic, is this huge book dealing with the nature of justice. And he talks about in that, he's looking for like the most just person, the perfectly just man. And he says the most just person would basically be they'd be the most virtuous, the best person, but they would suffer the most for it. So they would get no rewards for being just. So like, it's easy to be just if people are going to give you loads of fame and loads of money, and people will celebrate you. But he's like, but if a really just person came to earth, we'd all hate them because we'd all be jealous of them, basically. So we'd basically torture them, we'd throw them in prison, they'd be betrayed. And he actually says in some of the translations that they'd be crucified, which is really interesting, or impaled. This is 400 years before Christ. You can look it up, it's book 2 of the Republic. He describes what would happen to the just person if they ever came to earth, basically.
Wow.
And I was reading that, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That he's predicting this 400 years. And like, even St. Augustine, who's an early, like one of the Latin church fathers, he says Plato like pointed at the country, but Christ actually went there. So Christ kind of shows the way for all of us to get to the highest good, essentially. But Plato saw how they were going to get there. These guys were early kind of study, and it was through getting into that worldview then I kind of warmed up to Christianity more, and I was like, okay, there's something here. But sorry to go back to your question, that was a very long tangent.
No,
apologies about that. But the question then of like, which one is it going to be? You know what I mean? For Protestant, I knew I didn't like the Protestant Reformation. I thought it was a very modernist movement, basically. It was trying to desacralize a lot of it.
From the start, you thought that? From
the start, yeah. I recognized that because they removed the sacraments, they removed confession, a lot of the stuff, even interpreting the Eucharist as a symbol. Again, that never happened before 1600. Like, it's complicated, but...
Yeah. I think I'd be a bit... closer to Protestantism than you're describing. I can see how they would think, for instance, confession, that it's a thing between you and God, and why is there a need for an organization to go through to validate that or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but I guess the point in the Catholic tradition anyway is that the priest is the intermediary between God. So he's in persona Christi, in a sense. When you're confessing, you're not confessing to the priest, you're confessing to Christ, and that's where he gets the authority for absolution. But I also think there's also, I mean, I know you had some thoughts about the faith and works thing as well. Like for me, I have 3 objections really to Protestantism, which is the faith and works problem, sola scriptura, and then like no desacralizing, like taking out the sacraments, basically.
So can I so on faith and works, I'd probably have the Protestant point of view or thinking in that from reading Jesus, and it seems that anyone who's repentant, that they're accepted into heaven or the kingdom of heaven, and they're saved. And it's not really about what you do or mistakes you make. I think there's probably a personal aspect for me, because I had OCD and it had like a moral sense. And it kind of latched on.
Very debilitating.
It kind of latched on to religion. And I was constantly worried about sinning or doing something morally wrong, and really that like you were saying, faith just through Jesus, that the Protestants believe, not through works, was really kind of helpful for me, because it was like took the pressure off that I had to do everything perfectly, which was kind of what my OCD was. And that's such
a problem for so many people. Like, thanks for sharing that with me. I know, because that is totally difficult. I even felt that when I became a Catholic as well, of like the pressure of it in some sense to be, but I think that comes from not knowing what you're actually supposed to be doing in some sense. It's just like everything could be a sin, and everything you can't, it becomes this scrupulosity in a way that's really, but I think you can go the other way as well, which is part of the problem. Because like for me, I suppose with the faith thing, if you proclaim, your faith in God, but then you go out and you rob a bank tomorrow, or if your behavior doesn't exemplify, because I think faith should be embodied in that sense of like, you should be able to see it in the person in some sense. And then, but how do you see it in them if you can't evaluate actions, if you know what I mean? Like that, for me, that's just a flaw in it that it kind of precludes like morality in some sense. Cause it's like, if you can't evaluate one action is right and one action is wrong in some sense, then it's very hard to judge when you're on the right track or when you're not. So like somebody could proclaim they have the faith, but then be, you know, doing again like the bank robbing example. So
like there's definitely quotes from Jesus you could have on both sides. Obviously, the like faith without works is dead would be like your point of view, and then but then there's because even just reading last night was I'm paraphrasing Jesus here, but always a dangerous thing to do. But it was like the man who has sinned 100 times and is repentant will enter the kingdom of heaven more than the completely just man who is kind of self-righteous or whatever.
I mean, and also it's important that Catholics don't think that you're saved by your works. You know what I mean? Because like that would be Pelagianism, basically. That you could like force God to save you by being so good, whereas we think we're saved by the grace of God as well through it. But again, it's just that the faith has to be exemplified in your actions in your life. So it's also you're saved by the grace of God, not by your own efforts. So it will be very similar in that way as well. I also think about sin in general. We have a real like kind of like it's very bad, like, you know, you should be hit with a big stick or something like that, a very like self-flagellating version of sin. It's funny, the Arabic word for sin is actually, it means unripeness, which I really like. It's like it's ways in which we're not fully finished, and obviously we're human beings, like we're not going to be fully finished. And so in some sense sin is actually the place where the opportunity for your development is, for your virtue, for like becoming whole. So it's like not to have the attitude of like, oh, I need to be totally perfect, but to have like, to be like, yeah, I'm going to work on this thing, and I'm going to work a little bit on it, and like try and be honest in your examinations of conscience and repent and try and get better. But there's no point in like beating yourself over the head with it, because it's like, and in some sense that could become a sin itself.
Yes.
Become like you drive yourself crazy, and then you don't want to do it anymore, you know what I mean?
And then that would kind of mirror the Pharisees in the Bible, I suppose, who are like beating themselves up on other people about sins, and they're probably the people who Jesus criticized the most in the Bible, like totally more than any other group of people nearly. So that shows kind of, I suppose,
and there's something there's something really important there of like, is it, because oftentimes Christianity, when I was younger, I would have thought like it's all about rules, like it's all about all these rules that you have to follow. But as St. Augustine would say, love God and do what you will. Like the only reason for the rules and all that stuff is because we don't love as we should. We love things of the flesh, we love, you know, things we don't will the good of the other, we love our own intellect too much. It's like our love needs to be transformed in order for us to love properly, and that's the point of the sacraments and all that stuff, is actually like they're stepping stones to get us on the other side of that transformation. But it's actually like something really good that you would want, basically. It's not like just like, oh, I have to do this crap again, and it's like you're getting forced along. It's like, no, it will be, we're almost like, I sometimes think about like a dog with a ball in its mouth, and the dog won't let go of the ball, but it wants you to throw the ball, and you're like, if you let go, I'll throw the ball, it'll be good. But it's like, oh, I can't do it. And that's like, our sins are just things we hold on to, but which if we let go of, it'll actually be way better. Like we'll have more joy, peace. They're not things we should want anyway. Like so I think having that attitude shift sometimes can be a bit more positive, man, because I think the negativity around it is just unproductive. Like,
and I think that's what puts that's the image of Christianity and Catholicism that a lot of Irish young people have, is just like, it's nonsense, and it also has all these rules that I don't want to follow, like, and some of them aren't as obvious, like some of them aren't, like, some of them they're not as self-explanatory as others, so it's hard for them to follow, for them to justify following those rules. But like I with that kind of moral OCD that I had, reading about Jesus' attitude to the Pharisees was very helpful as well, because they were like, I suppose I saw a lot of myself in them, in that very rules orientated, and I have to do this, and just him kind of like criticizing them all the time was kind of saying, I shouldn't be like that, whatever.
And sure, he said, you know, love your neighbor and love God, like that's it at the end of the day, like, compared to like the Jewish tradition, which is much more rule based, like, you know, not just the 10 Commandments, but whatever the 612 or 620, like that was a very deontological, is a rule based ethic, like. But Christianity or Catholicism particularly isn't. It's a virtue ethic. I think it's about a transformation that we have to undergo. And that's, you know, the transformation to love as we should. Like one thing that
really interests me is that kind of transformation of yourself. And like I know in the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, they have that theosis idea of it's like becoming God, like not in the sense of obviously becoming divine, but like really making an effort to embody Jesus or the way he acted. And yeah, like I find that really helpful, and like when I wake up in the morning, and just to kind of try and put your, like, because you kind of have all these kind of desires and your ego a lot of the time in your head, and it's just like you can really kind of make sure that you embody that kind of like I hear people online call it like Christ consciousness. Yeah, just like change your whole mindset, and it actually, you can just nearly feel a weight go off you when you do it.
Totally. And
really,
that's the point of it, in a sense. Is like, really, it's crazy. Like, if you went to a lot of Catholics and you're like, you're supposed to become like God, they'd be like, what are you talking about? That sounds like some crazy stuff. But it's like, no, that's it. That's literally the core of your faith. Like, that's what you're supposed to be doing. In the West, it'd be sanctification, deification. In the East, they call it theosis. But it was big in the monastic tradition. It's very important, this process of like purification, illumination, deification are the kind of 3 steps. Like, purification is a lot of the exercises, the stuff like fasting, like prayer, like abstinence, asceticism, which obviously can go too far. But the point of those exercises, again, is this inner transformation, this inner conversion, because in a sense, it's built on a worldview. Like, the modern kind of worldview is like, we think we have instant access to reality. It's like, reality's just like this. That's it. I don't need to do a transformative journey to get closer to reality. I just have it immediately. Whereas in classical traditions or ancient traditions, reality wasn't the normal day-to-day life. It required a transformation to get to it, to see through illusions. Because again, we're blinded by like our desires, by things that we want, things that we are attached to, that are kind of burden our perception of reality. And so in undergoing that purification transformation, you see through illusions into deeper realities. You undergo what's called self-transcendence, basically. So people, Karl Jasper has called this the axial age discovery. It was like 800 BC to 200 BC. You get like Socrates in the West, you have Confucius, you have Buddhism, you have Zoroastrianism. A lot of these people discover, there's something up with our attention, with our cognition. We don't see things exactly as they are.
Yeah.
And obviously the point is that God is the reality in classical theism. God is the reality beyond the kind of normal day-to-day world. So by undergoing that transformation, like, the end result of Catholicism is the beatific vision, which is where you see God face to face. That's the idea. Because we're finite, God's infinite. You have to undergo a lot of transformation to get closer to that even. And so Jesus says in one of the Beatitudes, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that's like that's an instruction manual. That's like, you gotta, if you purify your heart, you will see God, and you will see more of God. You will see, because you start to have, I think, something I didn't really expect, I suppose, as I underwent the sacraments, was having those experiences of such deep peace and joy. Whereas you think about like going to confession, people are like, oh, you're going to get like, given out to, it's going to be really bad. And you kind of go like, oh, geez, okay, I'm sweating going into this. But then when you come out, you're just like, whoa, okay, man, this is like, and you can feel it. I brought friends as well. And you're like, this is, something's going on here. Like,
100%. And that's kind of a big reason for me believing in God, is like, it's just, it really feels like, and like gut feelings, it's just like you really feel like you're saying, when you do forgive others, forgive yourself, follow Jesus' teachings, you can feel a weight off yourself that is like, and when you do fall into like going down a bad path or doing things that are consciously wrong, you can feel it in your body. Actually, I have a really interesting thing. The last couple of weeks ago on the Tommy Tiernan show, when people come on and he doesn't know who they are, there was a girl that came on that she was like in her 50s, but I don't know, I can't remember what age she was exactly, but she was in the IRA when she was younger, and she didn't kind of connect these things, but she said that one day she was assigned to go kill some man, I can't remember why, with a guy, but she said, on the morning of when she was supposed to do it, she got really sick, like she was vomiting, And she didn't connect this at all. She was just like, she was kind of saying like, oh, kind of, I'm glad I got sick that day. But she was like, oh, I got a stomach bug. But I was just thinking in my head, that's like, that's something going on inside her. It's like her, her spirit saying, we don't want to do this. Like, yeah.
Your
And
conscience, man.
your
Like
conscience,
properly acting, and like a bad conscience is like there's no peace from it. And in some sense, that's like what Nietzsche missed out on. Is like you can pretend like that doesn't exist, but then as you keep doing it, you will realize it. Like
Yeah,
you'll
and that's
know you're transgressing.
that's definitely
against
one of the
something.
biggest arguments for faith in God, because I know C.S. Lewis used in his book Mere Christianity that I was reading, that he used this argument that, say you're walking beside a forest and you hear a woman scream in the forest, but you know that if you keep walking, no one's going to know that you heard it. You won't get in any trouble. So like if you were kind of like saying all we are is like, like the animals or whatever, they would obviously say like your self-preservation, which is supposed to be like the highest like biological urge, would say keep walking. But what, like, for the atheist, like how would they explain that in 99.9% of people there would be something in their head that's like you should go in there, and that completely goes against like they would say the animalistic urge to just self-preservation, but there's something in you, and like that's like conscience, and I think it comes from God. But
Totally, man.
yeah.
And a higher, I think, reality, to be honest, than the animal version. Because you think about martyrdom, like even Christ, like going to be nailed to a cross to die from asphyxiation, and having birds eating your eyeballs, and like the Romans designed crucifixion to be the worst death possible, basically. Not even just physically, but psychologically, because you're completely exposed in this way. Everybody can see you completely stripped bare, and usually people would die from the animals eating them, first of all. So you're completely immobilized, you're completely stuck. And they used it as a technique of tyranny, basically, because like they made it so bad so people wouldn't transgress. Voluntarily going to do that is like, there's no evolutionary, like, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's moral in a sense, and that's why
Yeah.
he becomes this new standard for
Yeah.
everybody, because he shows us what goodness really is.
Yeah,
He
it's like
transcends.
the worst possible death. And even I know Jordan Peterson would have said this a lot about, like, and then you add on like the betrayal of his friend Judas. It's like all the worst things. He's like sweating blood from stress, which is actually a medical reality that I only found out recently, but that it can happen to people. It's pretty rare, but like under extreme stress. But all that, like, it's just the worst ending you can kind of meet, and he takes it on for a moral reason. And yeah, that's kind of the actually we get into symbolism now. I'm gonna, if anything, I didn't actually say to you this before, but if any kind of, like, say your favorite symbolism that comes to mind, that like, say Jonathan Pajot or whatever would say, I'll ask you that in a second. But one that really kind of blew my mind a couple of weeks ago when I was watching him he was saying that in Genesis the like there's like a thorn bush that's like depicted outside of the Garden of Eden. So like that's like the idealistic heaven, the Garden of Eden, and this is like seen as like depicted outside it as like a cast aside person, or dejected, really not doing well, like the castaways of society or whatever. And you're kind of thinking, when you're reading Genesis, why do they mention this? But then it's like really symbolic that what does Jesus wear as he's being crucified is the crown of thorns. So it's like he's taking like the lowest, like castaway, dejected thing in society, and he's raising it to be like the most like the crown of the King of Kings. Like, so it's like it's just like showing, like following on from what he says, like the last will be first and the first will be last. That when you do the moral thing, no matter how you're treated by others in this life, you will be kind of raised up or whatever.
It's such an inversion, man, of like,
Yeah.
you'd think like, the Messiah, the Jews thought the Messiah was going to be this like huge like warrior
Yeah.
kind of king that was going to come and free them for everything, and then it's actually the guy who's like tortured and put to death as a criminal basically, but completely triumphs over the biggest empire that ever existed. There's one thing on that in terms of symbolism that is really, it's kind of like extra biblical idea, but the idea that the wood of the cross that Christ is nailed to is the same wood as the tree in the Garden of Eden, the tree of good and evil, or good and bad, as Matthew Pajot says, of which Adam and Eve eat from. So it's from their sin, basically, of eating the apple, which is actually what Nietzsche recommends people to do, which is to become the author of good and evil. It's like, because we have that capacity for free will and rational judgment, we can fall in love with our own conceptions of good and evil. Basically, we can claim to be like the authors of reality, rather than reality being something outside of us that we're subject to, which is God, obviously. And so in their lack of obedience, their disobedience, they get cast out of paradise, and that's when the fall happens and sin enters into the world. And Christ redeems us from that through his sacrifice, basically through his obedience to God, even going into the darkest night possible. Obviously then he is resurrected, so he comes out at it, he shows that death isn't the worst thing, basically, that there's, the love is stronger than that. But I think that whole arc of salvation history, from like the disobedience of Adam and Eve in the beginning to the obedience of Christ bringing it back, is something that's just like, boom, you're like, there's a reason they call it the ultimate story. Like, this is like, that was thousands of years of history.
Yeah,
like,
it's like, how could you have a story so perfect? That's what it feels like.
And so they probably saw him doing it, and then probably they're like writing it down. They're like, whoa, I mean, he's even better than we thought. Like, they're seeing these connections, and it's just like mind blowing. And for me, it's stuff like that, because I think faith was something I didn't have, in any sense. But like, I think, because they often say faith is a gift, but I think that's a weird way of thinking about it, because faith is just trust, like it's pistis. But as you learn these things and as you peel back the layers, you get more trust, and then you'll go a little further. And for me, like, getting baptized was a big step, and like alienated me from a lot of people. A lot of people were just like, I'm not going with you there. Even within my own family, like, it caused problems, and like, it was a difficult, it would have been easier not to do that, to be honest with you. But the trust that I've cultivated in him and the tradition through learning was something that I knew I had to go on that path. Like, it would have been dishonest to continue not doing that, in some sense.
And just going back to, I think that in Ireland, what we're kind of taught, and I think a lot of the Catholic Church's kind of way of exposing young people to the church, I think, could be improved in that they don't really go near the like logical arguments for your faith, like say the historical route and that type thing, which I think I think that would be probably the most impactful for young people now. And it's not like it was always the way in the history of the Catholic Church with the thinkers of Catholicism. Like, a lot of them were using the historical evidence as not as like something that is, if you look into it, it's like you're less faithful or whatever. It's like something you should look into and let it kind of influence you in what you think. So even things like, I know if I brought up Christianity to people that I meet, a lot of them think Jesus wasn't, like, they say Jesus wasn't real. Whereas, like, it's literally even atheist historians, it's basically proven by letters written at the time by people Roman emperors. Sorry, I'm not sure.
Josephus and
more than the exact more than me, but it's basically proven without any objection that he was alive and was crucified. Obviously, there's objections to people whether he rose from the dead, whether he was divine, but like, what we do know is he was definitely alive. He was definitely crucified, and there was definitely people after he was crucified who were put to death for not saying they believed in they were put to death for saying they believed that Jesus rose from the dead. So they were obviously very convinced that it happened. And yeah, I was reading some letter. I'm sure you know it, but it was from a Roman emperor. So it was kind of, I think it was 40 A.D. Do you know the Roman emperor at the time? I don't know.
40 A.D. Tiberius or Vespasian?
Could have been Tiberius, but he wrote letters on, and it was just said like, it said that there's people being killed for, like, he was against Christianity, but he was saying like there's people here that we are putting to death for saying they don't believe that they believe Jesus rose from the dead. So that's kind of just proof that it was happening. Like there was an outside source, and there's many other sources of that, but obviously that's not going near the divine nature, or that he definitely rose from the dead. But
I just think it's such a deep like we've really lost. It's like, you know, if you don't use a muscle, it atrophies and it falls apart, and you don't use it. We've lost the ability to think about religion entirely. People can't even think about God. Like people a lot of time, because people argue. I was with some people who are arguing about like the traditional Latin Mass or like the Novus Ordo, and they're like, oh, change. I'm like, look, your problems are way bigger than that. Like modern people have no idea what God is. When you say God to them, they think of a big dude in the sky with a beard, and no, like
it's so
that's
true,
it. Like,
it's true,
and
like.
people are like, I don't see any guy with a beard. Like, you know what I mean? It's like it's become ridiculous. Like, and that's not what the classical tradition teaches at all. Like, it's, you know, God is an account of reality. God is ultimate reality, and it's not physical. But the problem is you have to teach people a certain amount of philosophy, because I do courses on this and stuff. I've been working on kind of a thing Dr. Zachary Porka is talking about. He's actually Eastern Orthodox, but he thinks we need a pre-catechism, which is like the catechism obviously is like the education of the church. It like teaches you how the church works. But you need actually a thing for secular people to be able to understand religious ideas again. I think that's what Jordan Peterson was doing, what Jonathan Pajot does. You need like almost like an adapter or something, like for your, you know, when you go on holidays and you can plug in an adapter and it works in a different power station. It's like our minds have been formed by this scientific materialist worldview, which is falling apart, by the way. It's not working. Everybody's depressed. It feels like the world's about to end. So that's not working. But we can't just go straight back into the religious worldview, because we're actually cut off from it by a lot of our assumptions, a lot of the ways we think. And so you need training and you need education to even understand what these people were talking about in the first place. Like that's sometimes, because people go as well, they're like, oh, I just pick up the Bible. And it's like, you can do that as well, but you also need to know what you're reading and what is going on and like what the aim of it is. And so we need a whole kind of education that doesn't exist yet, that I think guys like that we've been following are kind of piecing together. It's like,
and I think like I was saying, I think Protestantism would be a better evangelizer, or a better route for people young people into the faith in Ireland, if that was like encouraged in school, just because it has that culture of asking questions and kind of going through the logical argument, which obviously could be done in Catholicism, but I feel like they just don't seem to go near that with young people. And I think that's a problem, because like you were saying, young people just think it's a fairy tale. They don't even consider it that it might be true, like that it might have actually happened, that he was risen
and what it means, like, you know what I mean? Like, why does time start from when Jesus was born? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why are we in the year 2026? Like, it's a bit of a significant thing that you're saying time started again at that point. Like, might be worth explaining what's going on. Like, you know, could be
we
important.
decided to put all our calendars to this, but
it's like just this random thing, so we just changed everything.
We'll actually we'll restart the years again.
Maybe like next day I'll go to the shop and we'll just like restart, you know, year one. It's like, no, that's important. Like, that's significant. But I do think for Catholicism in Ireland particularly, it's been the dominant thing. So like that was it. They kind of got complacent. They didn't have to market to people. They didn't have to communicate.
That's definitely
everybody is Catholic in theory. But now with the secularization, more and more people are dropping out. I think it's totalizing in some sense, that it's like you're not going to have, it's like almost like a developmental stage that we're going through, where it's like people are going to be in that secular worldview, and then you're going to have to be able to get them out, because again, it's nihilistic, you know, it doesn't really work. And so there's stuff going on with that. I think with Protestants, they're very good at the evangelizing and the marketing. My big issue with that, though, is that you can end up with basically the idea is you just get people in, but it's like, what do people do when they're in? You know what I mean? The point of the sacraments is that inner transformation. But if you don't have that path of transformation in there, it's like you can get lots of people in, but then you've got a book club or you've got a rock concert and you've got something going on, and people aren't really going to be transformed by it.
Yes, I do see that too.
And so that's a risk there. Not with all Protestant tradition. I mean, certain ones don't. They have different takes on it. But I think that inner transformation is very important. Like that's what people will see again and being like, yeah, that's the stuff. So we can love because things are falling apart at the moment. But that's because the thing that held us together was love. It was love for each other. It was the willing the good of the other. But we've lost that now. And so people are tribalizing, people are fragmenting. We need to regain that capacity to love each other and do it and to support.
And that's a way back. I think people don't see the danger of there's basically never been before in history where people were atheists, or a lot of people were atheists, which is people don't think that people, I suppose atheists now, which is probably the majority of people, they think it doesn't matter that we've lost it because they don't believe in it, but
and they probably think it's a good thing as well, is that it's part of the narrative, I think, even that I grew up with, or that's like the secularization is a good thing. Like even like Richard Dawkins and these guys, they're like, religion is a cancer, religion is a plague, we're all going to get rid of it and we'll become rational and wise.
Yes.
But instead we became very depressed, very anxious, very addicted and very fragmented.
I remember what I was going to say was
hasn't panned
I
out.
kind of just came up with this example, I just kind of thought of it myself, like you don't know what in history, if people lacked belief in God, how bad things would have turned out, I believe. Like say, for instance, the Cold War, when like JFK and Khrushchev, I think it is, that from the Soviet Union kind of both had nuclear weapons, and they were like, if one person said, like, if you were JFK if you didn't believe in a higher power, which he did, you could easily justify that in that, I'm protecting my people. That's my job. I'm the president of this country. It's my job to protect my own. Like, there's all these justifications you could have made. But if he wasn't thinking there's someone kind of with him, and kind of like, yeah, he didn't have that kind of belief that there was someone kind of that encouraged, like, to put others before yourself and to value other people's lives. Like, I really think it would have been way more likely that he would have pushed that button, and then, the Soviet Union would have been nuked and America would have been nuked.
Yeah, the whole 20th century basically is the bloodiest century in the entire of human history. Like, it is the most. And those big battles between like the USSR and the Nazis and the Allies, like, they're all secular powers fighting each other. Like, they're political entities, and political entities aren't moral intrinsically. The morality is a standard that they're accountable to. So if you take away that moral standard, you just basically have Game of Thrones with just powerful things with nuclear weapons and highly advanced AI. It's like, why would they care about a single person's life? You know what I mean? They could just like program blip blip, kill that guy. Great, go for it. Like, it's like, that's not a good world. We shouldn't be going that way.
Again, they can justify that. Like, say, whatever you say, you can justify that these people are going to or might invade us, so we have to take the first step or whatever, or we want oil or whatever. Like, so but just back to as well. I remember Jordan Peterson was outlining this in that first episode that I referenced with Joe Rogan, but was like, if people don't have like this perfect ideal of Jesus, which he seemed to be, that, like, I think it'll kind of, people's ideals will erode over time. So like, say a young person now or whoever doesn't see Jesus as the highest ideal to like strive towards, they just pick, they don't believe in Jesus, so they just kind of, at the back of their mind, they pick someone else they admire. So whatever, Cristiano Ronaldo or whatever, some rapper, singer, whatever. That's fine, because I know, like, maybe those people have some good virtues, but they're human, so they're going to have some virtues that aren't so good. And if you have them as the ideal you're striving to, then then it's going to lead you astray. And then when these people grow up, and then they're the next generation, and then the young generation are picking one of them to follow, and it's just like, it just gets eroded over time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a complete downgrading effect that goes on. It's the basis of idolatry, really, which is
Yeah.
putting something in the highest place that shouldn't be there. So, like,
Yeah.
you worship wealth, or you worship power, or you
Yeah.
worship pleasure, or something. I mean, I've done this myself. I'm not like, I've tested it out. I tried to go as far as I could with the hedonism or whatever else, and it ends in despair, essentially, because you've got the thing at the top wrong. Like, but the Peterson's great point is, like, everybody worships something. Like, there's no way what you pay attention to and what you desire and pursue is your God for all intents and purposes. So if you choose the wrong one of those, like our whole society right now is like, if we, like, even the Celtic Tiger, it's like we oriented around money. Like, we wanted money, and then everything fell apart. It's like, but you have to value something. You can't switch off your consciousness or your desire. So we're always pursuing something. But if we get that wrong, it ends in destruction again. So, like, that point of idolatry has consequences. Like, it's not just, so there's a reason Jesus should be there, and I think we should understand why he should be there. I think part of it is what you've talked about as well, that the highest principle serves the lowest. He's the King of Kings, but he also washes the feet of the apostles. Like, he's not just a dictator or a tyrant that's totally beyond everything. There is this kind of circular, the lowest serves the highest serves the lowest, and that's the best model. But it's I think there's no way out of that religious problem anyway.
Yeah, and I think a lot of wars that are going on at the minute, you could say that the idolatry they have is nationalism, and
nationalism is a big problem as well.
Their countries.
And I mean, I'm an Irish national. I love Ireland, and, like, I don't mind saying that. But the problem is when the state becomes God. I mean, that's a terrible. And AI is a great example of that. Like, the idea of worshiping this kind of powerful, entity that they're trying to bring into existence is like another. It's you don't have to look very far for examples at the moment of experiments that we're trying.
Just we mentioned the King of Kings. So Peterson was kind of describing that as, like, the king is supposed to be a symbol. I know it's obviously not always the case, but a symbol of, like, the highest virtue or virtuous man that's elected king. That's, like, the kind of symbol of it, although it's rarely true. But so then you take all of them, like, I know you've heard him say this, but take all of the kings, and then you make the King of Kings, which is Jesus, which is like all the virtues, all the best virtues of all these supposed highest virtue people, and then you're bringing it all into one guy, and that's kind of the highest version of
and that's why
morality.
Jesus is sometimes, like, he's almost like a superhero, like, type figure, where he's like, he's a warrior, he's a healer, he's a sage, he's God. He's like, he brings all these things together and smash into one person in some sense. Like, he goes beyond all those categories. And that's, I mean, he does so much heavy lifting there in some sense. That's, like, I guess that's why he becomes an instrument of power as well. Sometimes people go to, like, there's plenty of people make an ideology out of Jesus as well, or an idolatry, which also turns people away from it. I think, like, in America, you see a lot of the evangelicals where they just say Jesus, Jesus on their lips, but not in their heart in some sense. And so it's like, we have to be careful of that as well. It can become just as bad.
I think something that Catholicism is really good at is, like, beauty. So, like, if you look at, like, some of the cathedrals, and have you ever been to the Vatican?
I was just in Rome this weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was in St. Peter's Basilica.
And you got in?
Sunday or Monday, sorry.
Yeah,
so 2 days ago.
So how was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I brought my atheist family there, so I try to just get the aesthetics to work on them, like, see if we can get them in.
Yeah. So it was kind of mind blowing, as I haven't been.
Oh man, it is just unbelievable. They used to, with Presbyterians in Ireland, they weren't allowed to go to Rome in case it converted them because it was so beautiful. Like, St. Peter's Basilica is just extraordinary. Like, but the aesthetics are, because again, the beauty points to the reality, truth, beauty, and goodness, three attributes, or the three transcendentals. But beauty points to God, basically. It's like, that's a way for you to perceive the higher reality here. So they really invest in, like, I mean, you look up and you're, like, looking into heaven. You're like, this is just incredible, It gives you a sense of that spiritual reality, but in the physical.
And I think that's definitely, like, something that kind of, I think, is a good, I think I find it as a justification for believing in God, or, like, proves it in some way that, like, when you have, like, suppose that feeling of awe, it's just like, it kind of feels like it connects you to something else. And like, some of the cathedrals, like you're saying, and also you think, like, some of those cathedrals or paintings, whatever, they couldn't have been done without the creator thinking like that there's a higher power and I'm doing it for them. Like it's probably the best motivator in history.
Yeah, it's why we've lost a lot of the sense of beauty now. Like I think it was Mary Harrington was talking about, because like cathedrals were in the Middle Ages like the biggest building projects they embarked on. Like that's what they spent all their money on basically. And he was like, well, why don't we build cathedrals anymore? It's like, oh yeah, we build airports and skyscrapers. So we invest in those things which are functional and have functions, but they're not beautiful, and so they don't raise your mind up to, again, like that awe and to that experience of the transcendent. And people suffer from it. I think people, it's part of your well-being to actually be participant, and that's why people, like in Rome, and like the streets are packed with people from all over the world that are paying a lot of money to be there just to have that experience of being like, yeah, wow, this is, this moves me on a very deep level. And so yeah, beauty, I don't think it's optional.
Yeah, I think it is definitely. I also, something a very big moment for me, which kind of ties to beauty, that really strengthened my faith, was a movie called The Tree of Life, which is actually what this podcast is named after.
Unreal.
But it's by a director called Terrence Malick, but and he's a Christian, but it's like very meditative movie, kind of going through a man's life and his relationship to his family. It's unbelievable. Like I've never been so mind blown. Like I was literally like, that sense of awe was like overcoming me for like the hour and a half that the whole movie was on.
I have to watch, man. I've never seen it before. Yeah,
it's
I'm gonna
unbelievable,
look this up.
and I'd encourage anyone to watch it. But yeah, it's like really meditative, and like really the music's really awe-inspiring, and the cinematography as well. But just watching that, I was like, the feeling that I got from watching that was like, I felt like, how could there not be a higher power? It was just like, it's hard to describe. You can look up the trailer; it'll give you a good sense of what it's like. But Terrence Malick, The Tree of Life was a big moment for me. Yeah,
The Tree of Life is a great name, man, because like Adam and Eve, when they get kicked out of the garden, they lose access to the Tree of Life. But the idea was that we're supposed to come back. Like that's where we're going to end up in terms of being able to take on the eternal life once we're properly oriented, and we've undergone the required transformation from Christ. And part of the reason he put the cherubim outside of the Garden of Eden to prevent Adam and Eve from getting back in was so that they didn't eat from the Tree of Life in their fallen state and live forever as fallen. Basically, it was like for mercy, for their own well-being. So like we're kept away from that because it's we need to become worthy of eating from it, but then we're going to be allowed back in basically by God, which is like a fitting goal, I would say, for the religious life. I
think that's most of what we're going to talk about. It's been actually very good. I'm happy how it's kind of flown. I kind of expected it to be a bit more awkward, just because it was my first time doing it. Man,
I'm honored. Like, I really enjoyed it. And I hope it encourages other people as well to kind of, what I say a lot of times to Catholics, they're like cradle Catholics, or that are like maybe not, is like to take a second look and like give it a go. You know what I mean? Go in, try and learn a little bit. There's amazing stuff now, like apps like Hallow app, Ascension app. It's not like back in the day where it's like you have no access. You have to go to a library to go read like Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologica or something. There's a lot of stuff out there now for you to address those questions in your head and to try and develop that relationship. Because there's joy, there's peace, there's wisdom. There's good stuff there that you can't get anywhere else.
Like you're saying, with the feeling, like I think there's no bigger sense of peace that you can get, and it's like, again, I've had like no more than anyone, I've had like a lot of kind of highs in my life, but it's just like it's not like I said, it's just fleeting. Like it doesn't. You're really happy for whatever time you have that achievement for an hour or whatever, but then it just kind of that peace is something that it just feels way more settling or something, and you feel like you're saying you really feel it in your body. Just to kind of add on to that as well, I think like I'd encourage anyone who thinks is nonsense or whatever to look into the historical evidence for it, because I think there's more than they would think. I think always it seems to be the case. But yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I was actually thinking maybe we could do a prayer at the end. I don't mind.
Totally.
I was just kind going to say a few words, but yeah, that'll kind of be it then. Yeah, I'll start. So in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Yeah, thank you, God, for today and how enjoyable it was, and please maybe let it kind of help some people that were watching, and maybe them to look into the faith a bit more, and or even just have more peace in their lives. And yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. I don't know if you want to say a few words or.
Amen. Yeah, just to give help people find the peace that they're looking for, because there's so much suffering in life anyway, but needless suffering as well, you know, and particularly for young people, I think, that are trying to find their way in the world. There's a lot of support and there's a lot of guidance, and there's really everything that's missing at the moment is in that great tradition. And so, as a person who came from the other side, you know, I hope that more people find their way there and can experience the treasures and the joy and the peace.
Lovely
That's
stuff.
what I hope. Amen.
Name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.